Let's review identity and access management concepts you'll need to recognize for the Security Plus exam. As with everything on this exam, the goal is not just to memorize definitions, but to understand how questions are phrased, so you can quickly match scenarios to the correct technology. We'll begin with authentication methods. If a scenario describes using multiple forms of verification, such as something you know, something you have, or something you are looking at multi-factor authentication, or MFA. Multi-factor authentication is all about increasing security by requiring more than one factor. A common trap is confusing this with convenience-based solutions like single sign-on, but remember, MFA is about stronger verification, not easier access. If instead the question says a user logs in once and can access multiple systems without re-authenticating, that points to single sign-on, or SSO. Single sign-on is about convenience and centralized authentication. This is often confused with MFA, but the key difference is simple. MFA increases security with more factors, while SSO reduces friction with one login. If the scenario involves users accessing resources across multiple organizations, with trust established between those organizations, that is federation. Federation allows identity sharing across domains. A common mistake is confusing this with single sign-on, but the distinction is that federation works across organizations, not just within one. If the question specifically mentions web-based authentication, identity providers, or browser-based login flows, using structured data, you are looking at Security Assertion Markup Language, or SAML. Security Assertion Markup language is commonly used for enterprise web applications and enables single sign-on across web services. A frequent trap is confusing this with OAuth or OpenID Connect, but SAML is strongly associated with enterprise browser-based SSO. Now shifting into network authentication. If a scenario involves centralized authentication for network or wireless access, especially using User Datagram Protocol, or UDP, you are dealing with Remote Authentication Dial-in User Service, or RADIUS. Remote Authentication Dial-in User Service is focused on granting users access to the network. If the focus instead is on administrators managing routers or switches, with detailed control over commands, and using Transmission Control Protocol, or TCP, that points to Terminal Access Controller Access Control System, Plus, or TACACS, Plus. Terminal Access Controller Access Control System Plus is used for administrative access and control of network devices. The key distinction here is user access versus administrator control. Now let's build on that foundation with access control at the network level. If a question describes authentication happening before a device is allowed onto the network, that is 802.1x, which is a port-based network access control standard. 802.1x ensures that devices are authenticated before gaining access. A common trap is confusing this with general network access control, but the key phrase to recognize is port-based authentication. Now let's move into wireless authentication methods, where questions often test fine details. If the scenario mentions certificate-based authentication on both the client and the server, you are dealing with Extensible Authentication Protocol Transport Layer Security, or EAP-TLS. Extensible Authentication Protocol Transport Layer Security requires certificates on both sides, which makes it very secure. If instead the question describes a secure tunnel where only the server has a certificate and the user authenticates with a password inside that tunnel, that is Protected Extensible Authentication Protocol, or PEAP. 1. Protected Extensible Authentication. Protocol protects credentials inside a secure tunnel. This is one of the most commonly confused comparisons. EAP-TLS uses certificates on both sides, while PEAP uses a server certificate and a protected password. Now let's bring everything together using recognition patterns, because that is how you win points on the exam. If you see multiple authentication factors, think multi-factor authentication. If it is one login for many systems, think single sign-on SSO. If it involves trust between organizations, think federation. If it is browser-based enterprise login using an identity provider, think security assertion markup language, SAML. If it is network or wireless authentication, think remote authentication dial-in user service, Radius. If it is administrative control of network devices, think terminal access controller access control system plus TACACS plus. If access happens before network entry, think 802.1x. If certificates are required on both ends, think Extensible Authentication Protocol Transport Layer Security, EAP-TLS. And if credentials are protected inside a secure tunnel, think Protected Extensible Authentication Protocol, PEAP. The most important takeaway is to separate security, convenience, and scope. Multi-factor authentication increases security. Single sign-on increases convenience. Federation expands access across organizations. Radius handles user network access, while TACACS Plus controls administrators. And when it comes to wireless authentication, always look for whether certificates are on both sides, or if a tunnel is protecting a password. If you can recognize those patterns and avoid the common traps, you'll be able to quickly narrow down your answer choices and select the correct solution with confidence.